long black hair. Skin is white as snow, and her face is really beautiful, but if you look closely her mouth is slit ear to ear. She is a terrifying woman everyone is afraid of. And he says that he is also afraid of her. And then she calls him. And goes ahead and asks him if she is beautiful, while have her mouth fully opened. And then to her surprise he says it's 20 points. Which gave her a shock and she was blushing. And she goes on by saying that she really tried to make her face more scarier than yesterday, so why hasn't he getting scared? To which he says he couldn't able find any difference. Hearing that she says she is that mouth slit woman that everyone is afraid of. But he just laughs saying that she should change her approach to scaring people, since he isn't afraid of her. And then he goes on by saying that he is her husband, so why would he be scared of her? Hearing that she was blushing. And his name is Sano Kochi, who is an 17-year-old. Afterwards she tells him that they are just engaged and not married yet. And then Sano says that it's been a week since she arrived here. And she is even coming in his dreams to scare him. And while saying that he straight up takes the first panel of this manga, saying that it was the scariest she was ever been. And then he asks her, isn't it been 40 years? And then hearing that she says it's been exactly 53 years. And that time she was a well-known urban legend, where everyone is afraid of her. And she goes on by saying that she even became famous on the social media. But they weren't afraid of her. And because of that she was forced to get engaged with him. And then she goes on by thinking that her legend started by a priest spreading rumors. But now that the rumors are fading away she is also going to die. But to avoid that she had taken some actions to extend her lifespan. And there are some families out there living to make the urban legends live. And if an urban legend is about to die they have to get engaged with the head of the family in order to survive. Afterwards she goes on by saying that he is just 17 years old, and she just refused to get married with him. Even though it might be beneficial for her in the long term, she still refuses. And she says she wants to get her power by her own way by scaring people. And she gets more motivated while saying that she wants to hear those helpless screams daily. Afterwards she says it's just a contract that they have between them, which is the first step for her. After hearing that he was just standing there, what does she mean by contract? After hearing that she started to tell him that if only she could scare him before marriage. And then he interrupts by saying that he remembers the contract. Which is if he turns 18, they will be living as a husband and wife, but if she were able to scare him at least once before he turns 18, they will call of this marriage. Hearing that she says that's right. And then he asks her on why she is opposing their marriage. To which she says even if he comes from the exceptional family, he is still a human. And top of that she is not even a human, then how could they get married? And then he shouts at her saying that she is actually worrying about him. Afterwards he goes on by saying that it will be great if everything just works out fine. And then he confesses his love to her. Which really shocked her, but he says that he wants to marry with the person he loves and it will be the best scenario. But she just tells him to stop joking around. Afterwards he says that he also have a condition to make. Which is on top of her trying to scare him. And if she were ever fallen for him. And then he goes on by saying let's see whether if she gets to scare him or he gets to fall her in love with him. In this 1 year, which will be really interesting. And he smilingly says it's a pleasure to meet her. And hearing that she was blushing. And then she shouts saying as if she will fall for him. After a while she was smiling and thinking that this room got good lighting enough to plan strategy which will scare Sano. And while she was thinking about it he came behind her and touches her shoulder. And he was even wearing a demon mask. And seeing that she got scared. Afterwards he just tells to her that he just wanted to have a talk with her. And then he goes on by saying her plan that she was about to set in here. Which shocked her. And then Sano says that he is glad that it only 2 of them, while she is stitching her mouth. After she thinks to herself that she is engaged with the guy that's named Sano Kochi, and they made a promise which was her to earn her freedom she must scare him at least once. And then he says that she failed again. And then he goes on by saying that these are the antique that he have been collecting out of his hobbies. And then he says maybe because of that he is not afraid of her slit mouth. But this made her shocked. Afterwards she says that she wasn't actually planning anything and he is taking it too far. Since moments before he was holding her slit mouth. Saying that she should just leave it, while she is saying that she should yarn it. But hearing that he says that she is the only one he loves. And he says that it doesn't matter how she looks, she is always beautiful. And this made her to blush, and she was thinking that this is the boy that she is trying to scare. And he was saying I love you again. After hearing that, she asks him if he is making fun of her, and while she is saying that her yarn just ran out. And then she decides to stitch it for now and buy some afterwards. Afterwards he asks her on why she is always walking around with that looks. And he asks her on isn't she prefers to walk around with her mouth slit. To which she says yes. But being like that will also be troublesome, so whenever she doesn't have to use her mouth she stitches it back. And she says that by doing it she is saving some energy to her. But then Sano says that stitching it again and again is what sounds energy consuming. And then she started to say that she can't really help it since it's hard for her to control her mouth. And then she started to shout at him saying if he got a problem with her, since he is always complaining. And then all of a sudden he says that no matter how her mouth looks she is always pretty. Which made her to blush. And then she started to think to herself that this is the first time someone has ever said that. Afterwards he goes on by asking her if stitching up like that bothers her. To which she says that it's like having a strand of hair or like a fingernail. It's like a part of her body. And after hearing that he asks her if he could touch it. And she tells him to touch it, since it's not like she can feel anything. And all of a sudden she got a feeling like something touched her lips. And she quickly opens her eyes. And he was just standing there smiling. And he asks her if she felt his lips. Which really shocked her. And she asks him on what he just did. To which he simply says that he just touched her. And she started to say that he just can't do that stuffs, since they're just engaged not married. And after crashing out for a while she thinks to herself that it's actually not bad and it felt good. But then Sano says that it was actually his finger. And this made her in a disbelief. And she was fallen in the floor. While he was saying that he thought she would be mad if he touched her. Afterwards he leaves the place saying it's time to go back while she was just sitting there in silence. Afterwards she was blushing and thinking it was just his fingers. And at outside he was looking at his fingers which was red. And he rethinks himself of touching her cheeks and also her lips with his fingers. Afterwards at the room she was still there thinking about what was she even thinking back there. Afterwards Sano says that she just felt his lips. And then he goes on by saying that he wants to know everything about her. And then he closes their distance while putting his hands on her hands, but she was thinking that if this continues. But before she could finish that she woke up. And she realizes it's still morning. Afterwards she started to blush thinking why she is dreaming about him. And she goes on by thinking that she knows more about humans and they all are scared of ghosts and spirits. But that guy wasn't got scared when they met at first time. And then she opens the door by saying that she doesn't know what that guy is thinking at all. And then she was shocked to see the old lady, and she says it's the wife. And she goes on by thinking she got her off guard. And she realizes that old lady must be the maid. Afterwards that maid says that Sano left to school. Hearing that she was confused, since what does she mean by school? And then she started to process the information. And she realizes that he is 17 years old, so which means he is now in high school. And then she asks the old lady so he will be back in a couple of hours. And then she goes on by getting happy, since it's her chance to scare him off. And she decides to get into a position to scare him. And then she started to run away saying that she will actually catch him off guard. After running around for a while, she realizes that he is just standing there and not at school. But then a guy was getting mad at Sano, and she realizes that he has a blonde hair and pierced ears. And she started to panic since it looks like he just ran into an scary guy. And she even thinks this happened because he may bumped his shoulder. But she was more shocked to find out that guy is actually talking to someone other than her. After that she started to think on what could have possibly started this fight, which was Sano replying something rude to that guy. And in the end she decides to leave him alone, since he is talking with someone that's dangerous looking. And all of a sudden Sano says he doesn't want to go to that scary place. After hearing that she realizes that Sano is getting kidnapped. And he even mentions scary place, so for Sano to say that he must be really in trouble. And he might even be taken to somewhere. And she slightly blushes thinking that she doesn't want that. And she goes on by thinking that she doesn't care about what other people think about her. And then she started to remove her stitches from her mouth. And she calls both of them. While thinking she is the one that will scare that boy. while she asks them if she is beautiful. But looking at that, the other guy was really scared. And he started to run away by shouting, while she was happily saying that was easy. And then Sano looks at her silently. Afterwards she started to say that he is really pathetic, since he got into a fight, and that she asks him to at least say something. And then she started to yap by saying that she just didn't want to lose to a human, that's why she helped him. Afterwards she started to brag by saying on how her skills were, it surprised him. But he was still silent, and she is still yapping. In the end she tells him to not ignore her. And then Sano Kuchi was still a kid. And it was his classmate, and he was getting mad at him by saying he doesn't care if his family is rich or not. It doesn't make him better than them, and he tells Sano to not look at him. But Sano was just thinking it's such a troublesome, while his classmate is still saying that no one wants to be his friend. Sano was a loner who doesn't have anyone to hang out with. Afterwards Sano was thinking to himself that he doesn't have anyone, while reminding himself that he shouldn't say that. And to his surprise they were scared of something. And he turned behind to see what happened. And it was Miroku, and she asks them if she is beautiful. And when everyone is surprised, but Sano was thinking long black hair and snow-white skin. With a beautiful face, and he goes on by thinking that she is his, but before he could finish it, Miroku wakes him up asking him if he is listening to her. And he was silently looking at her, and then he says it's nothing, and he goes on by saying that he was just thinking on how much he loves her, but this shocked her. And she started to say that why was she is even planning to ambush him. But then he calls her thinking that she probably won't even remember that. And he says thanks to her for saving him. Hearing that, she started to blush. After a while they are walking back to home, and she asks him if he gone to school. But he just says he is done with school. Hearing that, she tells him to go to school since it's just barely 8 in the morning. But he still says that the school is over and he is coming back to home. And after returning home, that guy was standing in their home, while she is hiding behind him. Afterwards he says that he was always apologizing to the teachers because he is not attending the school and skipping them. And he goes on by saying he is not getting away this time. While she was thinking if Kuchi is friend with that blonde guy. But then Kuchi says that he is the one that ran away. To which he says he did it without thinking. And then he asks Sano if that lady is still there. And then she comes out a little, and looking at her he got scared again. And she was thinking whether if Kuchi know him or not. Afterwards he goes on by apologizing, since he didn't knew it was just her fiancé. And he goes on by introducing himself as a bodyguard of the Kuchi. And then he says it's nice to meet the wife of him. And she wondering what does he mean by assistant bodyguard. To which he says that he had been taking care of Kuchi ever since he was a child. And then he goes on by telling him to get back to school. And then he started to say that he doesn't want to go back to that scary place. After hearing that, she asks him if school is really that scary. And she started to panic thinking if he is getting bullied, which he rejected right away. Afterwards he started to say that to go to school he needs to be there before 8 a.m. So to reach there at time, he needs to leave the house at 7 a.m. and then the school finishes at 15:30 and he will be back to home at 17, so which means if he goes to school his time spent with his wife gets reduced by a ton. Afterwards his bodyguard says that he is now a student, so he should prioritize studies over anything. But then Kuchi says that there is nothing more important than spending the time with their loved ones. After hearing that, he gives up and asks Miroku to say something to him. But she was thinking about that humans are afraid of the time, so this might be good to scare Kuchi. And while they were talking about it, the old lady comes out and calls Kuchi. And she started to say that his wife won't like it if he keeps on acting like this. Since she just came here a week ago, and he should be focusing of the studies. After hearing that, both of them were silent for a while. And then he decides to go to school since his wife said him to not skip school. Afterwards both of them were silently looking at him. After that, the bodyguard says it's really weird of Kuchi to be selfish. Because he already got a lot of problems with his family. And then he goes on by saying that ever since he was a child he never talked with anyone, but now it's good since he is at least being selfish. And then he started to laugh by saying he can't believe he is madly in love with Miroku. And then he tells to her that she should take care of him. After hearing that, she asks him if he is keeping a close eye on Kuchi all this time. To which he says that he has been keeping a close eye on him all this time, which Miroku is wondering if he can actually see. And then she started to ask him to show her on how he looks inside that hair. Afterwards he says he can't show his face. But then she still insisted him to show her his face. But hearing that he says it's too soon for that to happen and he is also a shy person. And she tells him to come close to her. And all of the sudden Kuchi comes in and stops her. And he started to say that he looks like this, because that's his character design, so there is nothing they can do. Afterwards he calls her and gives her the yarn that she ran out yesterday. And then he says he got it at the school in the sewing club. While Yuta was wondering did he go to school just to take that. Afterwards receiving that she just looks at it silently. And then they leaves the house. But then she suddenly calls Kuchi and tells him to take care while blushing. But then Kuchi smiles and says he will. But Yuta just looks at it silently. And he thinks to himself that he actually smiles good. And while going to the school he asks him wasn't it nice to have his wife to say bye at him. Afterwards she was asking Yuta on when does he lower his guard. To which he asks back is it because of that dumb game they are having, to which she says it's not dumb game and it's an official contract. And then she goes on by asking him even she sets up an ambush he somehow gets behind her. And sometimes he actually sees through her tactics. And then she goes on by asking him to tell his weak points since they are friends. But when she asked the old lady she dodges the question by smiling. Afterwards he says that Kuchi is actually weak at the morning. And she believed it. Afterwards she comes into his room. And she started to think that humans are actually weak and defenseless at a time like this. And she thinks to herself that it's time to hear him scream. And then she goes on by getting close to him. And she asks him if she is pretty, while showing a menace face. But he just looks at her silently. And he was just looking at silently for a long time. And she realizes that he isn't woken up fully. And then he grabs her neck and pulls her closer. And their face was really close. And then she gets back saying that was really close and she failed to scare him once again. Afterwards she realizes that she haven't removed the yarn. And she decided to remove it, but before she could do that he pulls her near him, and he goes back to sleep while having her near him. But looking at that she started to blush. Afterwards she started to tell him to let go of her. But he just tells her to shut up and sleep. After that she says Yuta or the maid might come in. But Kuchi just says it's Sunday so it doesn't matter. Afterwards while blushing she tells him to let go of her. And she realizes that he is already sleeping. After that she was really blushing and suddenly she remembers Yuta saying that he never talks that much and he even didn't get to know his parents. And she thinks but he still looks relaxed. And while sleeping in the bed she closes his nose. But he started to give some random noise, which made her to panic. And he suddenly tells her to sleep until 10 am. And she also think it doesn't matter if it's once or twice. And in the end she also slept with him. Afterwards he wakes up and was shocked. And he looks at her sleeping in his bed. And this made him to blush really hard. And he thinks to himself how does this even happen?